Is going through family court a cruel and unusual punishment? I was contacted this week by a father, a doctor who is a GP. He had already spent over £20,000 on child arrangements proceedings with a rip-off and totally unnecessary lawyer. He had run out of money and was now turning to us at the McKenzie Friend UK Network for support. He explained to me his circumstances, and initially I made his day far, far worse, when I told him that we could have got him into a far more positive position for about £1,500 rather than the £20,000 in legal fees that he had already spent. Indeed, if he had placed the £20,000 on a bonfire, it would have been more useful. At least it would have generated some heat. He replied that he now understands that, as he has seen all my blogs and was feeling gutted. Anyway, having now signed up through us, he said something that caught my attention. He said that his experience of going through family court was akin to cruel and unusual punishment. As far as an analogy for the family court is concerned, I found that interesting, given that cruel and unusual punishment is defined as inflicting suffering, pain, or humiliation on a person. So let's have that debate. I am Kedge, a retired police chief inspector and director of the McKenzie Friend UK Network. I have been a McKenzie Friend for a decade and founded the national campaign of #LightNotHate. If you would like the assistance of a McKenzie Friend, because honestly you don't need lawyers, or you would like to become a McKenzie Friend, please visit lightnothate.co.uk and subscribe to my YouTube channel. In my blogs, my views and opinions are entirely my own. I'm going to call the GP Dr. Chris. He is aware that I'm doing a blog and consents to general information being used that in no way can identify him. Some information has therefore been changed very slightly just to ensure that no one can connect any dots. Dr. Chris separated from his wife 2 years ago. He has 2 small children, a 2 and a 5-year-old. For the first year after separation, things were amicable and he was having good contact. But occasionally that routine would be broken with the occasional frustrations. All relatively good so far then. Then in March 2020, COVID broke out. By April, his ex stopped all contact, citing safeguarding concerns around COVID relating to his job as a GP. With absolutely nowhere else to turn, and having not seen his children in weeks, he found a lawyer to put in an application, which was very much misguided and a huge mistake. He should have contacted us. It was 6 weeks later that he got the first remote directions hearing with still no contact. At this point, Mum's somewhat irrational position was still holding firm. The first hearing was with magistrates who Dr. Chris described as being clueless and were just being told what to do by a clerk. I've no doubt that many of you may have had that very same experience. Anyway, not to dwell on magistrates, who of course are all very nice, public-spirited people. Now at the hearing, Mum agreed to restart contact until the next hearing, but it had to be in a contact centre. What the rational thinking behind that was, who knows? There were no safeguarding issues. Dr. Chris was legally represented and somehow that all got agreed. Shortly after leaving court, all contact centres then closed because of COVID, turning a temporary order into nothing more than a useless piece of paper. Dr. Chris then tried to negotiate seeing the children, and a few £1,000s in unnecessary legal fees later, Mum came back with an offer. One would hope, of course, at this point for a sensible breakthrough, until he found that contact came with conditions. That it had to be in an open area, where he had to socially distance from the children by 2 metres at all times, and she had to be there to supervise it. Clearly, things were now going from irrationally mad to certifiably nuts. However, Dr. Chris had no choice but to comply. To cut his own long story short, they returned to court. There were new orders which were breached as Mum applied more draconian conditions to any contact. Dr. Chris applied for enforcement, which was ignored by the court at all the subsequent hearings. 1 year on, Dr. Chris remains in the court system. He has had 5 hearings and paid tens of thousands of pounds for his solicitor and barrister. As he explained, he could have done a better job himself, and now feels that the bottom has fallen out of his life. He feels disempowered, abandoned, exhausted and anxious. His own health has suffered, and all he wants is to see his children every other weekend and half the holidays. With lawyers having been involved, both parties have come to hate each other, being pitted against each other, being unable to move forward, and this has resulted in resistance at every step of the journey. Thankfully, Dr. Chris has now turned to us, a little late, but as they say, better late than never. We're going to help put him back on the right path. I'm certainly going to sympathise with Dr. Chris. I also know that thousands of you may have found yourselves in a similar situation over the last 12 months. So, has Dr. Chris experienced suffering, pain and humiliation at the hands of the family court system? Let me answer that by telling you what I think of the family court system. If someone asked me to build a confused and nonsensical family court system that was founded on an adversarial system, which on the one hand invites parents through its doors to fight against each other through allegations, evidence and cross-examinations, whilst on the other hand then criticises the parents for being adversarial and pitting wars against each other because it harms the children, then I would keep the dysfunctional system that we have, because that is exactly what it does. The UK family court system is totally schizophrenic in the way it operates. If it were a patient, it would need to be sectioned to prevent significant harm to others. If someone asked me to build a system that encouraged people to bring in professional lawyers who have no duty of care to any child, to help parents pit and engage war against each other with no regard or concern to the innocent children caught in the middle, and causing the parents to suffer crippling financial debt and legal fees, I would keep the system that we have now, because that works just fine. If someone asked me to build a system that could drag the drawn out emotional conflicts of two human beings over the coals for periods routinely lasting well over 9 months, sometimes for years, then I'd keep the system we already have. Perfect. If at the heart of a system I was asked to build an organisation that gives recommendations to the court, let's call it CAFCAS, and that organisation had to adopt guidance, let's call it the Child Impact Assessment Framework, that is flawed, unfit for purpose, and causes the mass resentment of thousands of service users, I would say, let's keep the system and guidance we have. If I had to build a family court system that, as an establishment, treats people in a manner that is only slightly better than feeling as if you are in the forced establishment of the prison service, then let's keep the family court system exactly the way it is. So what does all that add up to? Not only is it a broken system that would be an embarrassment to any modern civilised society, but it is heartless, cold, inhumane, and yes, at times cruel. By its very nature, it causes suffering, emotional pain, and often humiliates those using it. So here is my judgment based on all the evidence and the balance of probability. I find in favour of Dr. Chris that the family court inflicts cruel and unusual punishment on its service users. It's time for the public to take back control and demand change. Dr. Chris has had advanced viewing of this blog and is delighted with it. He wants to warn others not to make the same mistake he made by using lawyers. If we can help you with any aspect of your family court case, or you would like to share your story for a blog, then please contact me today at lightnothate.co.uk.